What would you do if you had just seconds to save a child from certain death? Today, witness the extraordinary true story of Max, a rescue German Shepherd who risked everything when a deadly rattlesnake targeted 3-year-old Emily at Oakwood Park. This isn't just about a heroic rescue. It's about how one split second of bravery created an unbreakable bond between strangers that will touch your heart. Hit subscribe now and comment where you're watching from as we dive into this incredible journey that's captivated America. The mid-September sun bathed Oakwood Park in a golden glow, casting dappled shadows through the ancient oak trees that gave the popular recreation area its name. Located in the suburban outskirts of Springfield, this sprawling green space had been the heart of the community for generations. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, the park hummed with the gentle rhythm of everyday life. Robert Wilson, a silver-haired man with kind eyes and weathered hands, sat on a wooden bench watching his granddaughter with undisguised adoration. At 72, he treasured these weekday afternoons with 3-year-old Emily more than anything. His daughter Sarah, a single mother and emergency room nurse, worked long shifts at County General, and Robert had eagerly volunteered to become Emily's afternoon caretaker. "Higher, Grandpa, higher." Emily squealed as Robert pushed her on the swing. Her chestnut curls bounced with each movement, her blue overall dress fluttering in the breeze. "All right, princess, but just a little higher," Robert chuckled, his voice carrying the slight rasp of age. "Your mom would have my head if she saw how high we're going." Emily's laughter rang out like tiny bells. "Mommy doesn't have to know," she said with conspiratorial glee. Robert winked at her. "That's between us park adventurers, isn't it?" After the swings, Emily spotted a monarch butterfly with vibrant orange wings. "Look, Grandpa, a flying flower," she gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. "That's a monarch butterfly, sweetheart. They're special visitors," Robert explained, lowering himself carefully to her level. His knees protested with a familiar ache, but he ignored it. "Can I follow it? Please?" Emily begged, already bouncing on her toes in anticipation. Robert glanced at his watch, 3:30 p.m. Sarah wouldn't be picking Emily up until 5 o'clock. "All right, but stay where I can see you," he cautioned, settling onto a bench with a clear view of the playground area. He pulled out the newspaper from his worn leather messenger bag, occasionally glancing up to check on Emily. Across the park, Jessica Miller was enjoying her daily walk with Max, her 4-year-old German Shepherd. With his alert ears and intelligent amber eyes, Max had been Jessica's faithful companion since she'd adopted him from the local shelter 2 years ago. The dog walked proudly beside her, his black and tan coat gleaming in the sunlight. "Good boy, Max," Jessica said, adjusting her ponytail as they maintained a steady pace around the park's perimeter trail. At 34, these afternoon walks had become Jessica's respite from long hours as a veterinary technician. "Just one more lap, and then we can take a break by the fountain." Max gave a soft woof of acknowledgement, trotting alongside her with disciplined energy. Little did either of them know that this routine afternoon was about to transform into something extraordinary, a moment when instinct would overcome training and split-second decisions would forge an unbreakable bond between strangers. Emily's tiny sneakers crunched through the carpet of fallen leaves as she followed the monarch butterfly's erratic flight path. The vibrant orange wings fluttered like a beacon, leading her toward a dense cluster of bushes near the eastern edge of the playground. Though still within the vicinity of her grandfather, a large oak tree now partially obscured Robert's direct line of sight. "Wait, Mr. Butterfly," Emily called out, her voice tinged with determination. She pushed a strand of chestnut hair from her face, her cherubic features set in concentration. The butterfly landed on a flowering bush, its wings opening and closing in a hypnotic rhythm. Robert glanced up from his newspaper, his eyes scanning the playground. He spotted Emily's blue overalls through the branches and smiled to himself. His granddaughter's curiosity both delighted and exhausted him. He returned to the crossword puzzle, penciling in ephemeral across 7 down, occasionally looking up to check on Emily's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Jessica and Max had stopped by the water fountain. Jessica took a long drink and then filled a collapsible bowl for Max. "Good walk today, buddy," she said, rubbing behind his ears as he lapped at the water. Max suddenly stiffened, his ears perking up. "What is it, boy?" Jessica asked, recognizing the change in his demeanor. Max's attention was fixed on the eastern edge of the playground. A low growl rumbled in his throat, so subtle that only Jessica noticed. Something in those bushes had triggered his protective instincts. In the dense undergrowth where Emily stood transfixed by the butterfly, hidden danger stirred. A timber rattlesnake, nearly 3 feet long with distinctive brown diamond patterns across its back, had made a temporary den beneath the bush. The snake, having ventured unusually close to the park's playground due to recent habitat disruption from nearby construction, sensed the vibrations of Emily's approaching footsteps. The rattlesnake's muscular body tensed, forming the characteristic S-shape that preceded a strike. Its tail began to vibrate, but the warning rattle was largely muffled by the thick layer of leaves and the ambient sounds of children playing nearby. Its unblinking eyes tracked Emily's movements with cold precision as its forked tongue flicked rapidly, tasting the air. "Pretty butterfly," Emily whispered, completely unaware of the danger coiled less than 5 feet away. She took another step forward, reaching out with pudgy fingers. Robert's newspaper rustled as he turned the page. He yawned and checked his watch, 4:15 p.m., less than an hour before Sarah would arrive. He looked up again, but could no longer see Emily's blue overalls through the branches. "Emily," he called, a note of concern edging into his voice. He folded his newspaper and stood up, his joints protesting. "Emily, where are you, sweetheart?" Across the playground, Max's behavior shifted dramatically. He pulled against his leash with unprecedented force, his focus intensely locked on something Jessica couldn't see. "Max, heel," Jessica commanded, but for the first time since his training, Max ignored her. His muscles bunched beneath his glossy coat as a deep, warning bark erupted from his chest. "Max, what's gotten into you?" Jessica struggled to maintain her grip on the leash. The urgency in Max's behavior alarmed her. This wasn't excitement or playfulness, but something primal. With a sudden, powerful lunge, Max broke free, the leash slipping through Jessica's fingers. "Max," she cried out in shock, watching as her normally obedient companion bolted across the playground toward the eastern bushes. The rattlesnake, disturbed by the approaching thunderous barks, pulled back further into its strike position, its attention now divided between the approaching canine threat and the small human just within striking distance. Robert's heart hammered against his ribs as he scanned the playground for Emily's blue overalls. The momentary lapse in his vigilance now stretched into terrifying seconds of uncertainty. "Emily," he called again, his voice cracking with rising panic. He moved as quickly as his arthritic knees would allow, navigating around the playground equipment. "Answer Grandpa, sweetheart." Emily, still entranced by the butterfly, had crouched down on her haunches, oblivious to both her grandfather's calls and the coiled danger mere feet away. The rattlesnake's muscles tensed further, its diamond-patterned body perfectly still except for the almost imperceptible quiver of its tail. "Hello, butterfly," Emily whispered, extending her small hand toward the insect that had now perched on a low-hanging leaf. "Do you want to be my friend?" The snake's head pulled back slightly, the final preparation before its lightning-fast strike. In the snake's primitive brain, the small human represented both a threat and prey, triggering its defensive instincts. Across the playground, Jessica broke into a run after her dog, her ponytail whipping behind her. "Max, come back," she shouted, but Max was driven by something more powerful than training, an instinctual recognition of imminent danger that transcended commands. Max's powerful legs carried him across the playground in seconds, his focus absolute. As he approached the bushes, he spotted the small girl and, just beyond her, the unmistakable shape of the rattlesnake preparing to strike. Robert rounded the large oak tree just in time to see a large German shepherd barreling toward his granddaughter. "Emily," he screamed, his worst fears materializing as he imagined the dog attacking the child. His aging legs couldn't carry him fast enough, and the distance seemed to stretch impossibly before him. The series of events that unfolded next happened in mere seconds, though for all involved, time seemed to slow to a crawl. Emily finally heard her grandfather's voice and turned her head, her butterfly momentarily forgotten. "Grandpa," she called, still unaware of the snake. The movement was the final trigger. The rattlesnake launched forward with explosive speed, fangs extended, venom glands contracting. "Max," calculating trajectory with instinctive precision, hurled his 80-pound body between the child and the snake. With a ferocious snarl that seemed to shake the air itself, he snapped at the striking reptile, catching it midair just inches from Emily's arm. The snake's fangs sank deep into Max's muzzle instead of Emily's soft flesh. Max yelped in pain but didn't relent, shaking his head violently as he pinned the snake to the ground. "Max!" Jessica screamed, finally reaching the scene. Robert swooped in and grabbed Emily, lifting her into his arms with adrenaline-fueled strength that belied his age. He staggered backward, clutching his granddaughter tightly to his chest. "Grandpa, the doggy is fighting a snake," Emily exclaimed, her voice a mixture of fear and amazement as she peered over Robert's shoulder. Max continued his battle with the rattlesnake, his powerful jaws clamping down despite the burning pain spreading from the bite. With a final decisive shake, he broke the snake's spine, rendering it harmless. The snake's body went limp in Max's jaws, and he dropped it to the ground, retreating several steps as the venom began to course through his system. Jessica arrived, her face ashen as she took in the scene, her beloved dog standing protectively near a small girl and an elderly man, with a dead rattlesnake lying nearby. Blood dripped from Max's muzzle where the fangs had penetrated. "Oh my God," she gasped, immediately recognizing the severity of the situation. "He's been bitten by a rattlesnake. We need to get him to a vet immediately," Jessica said, her voice trembling as she quickly assessed Max's condition. Years of veterinary technician training kicked in, overriding her personal panic. She knelt beside Max, who was now sitting, his breathing becoming labored as his muzzle began to swell visibly. Robert stood frozen, Emily still clutched tightly in his arms. The realization of what had just happened washed over him like ice water. "That dog. He saved her," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The snake was going for Emily. "Doggy hurt?" Emily asked, her lower lip quivering as she looked down at Max. Jessica nodded grimly, pulling out her phone. "He needs antivenom, and quickly. Snake bites can be fatal for dogs, especially facial bites." Her fingers trembled as she dialed her workplace. "This is Jessica Miller. I need Dr. Patel to prepare for an emergency rattlesnake bite victim, my own dog. We'll be there in 15 minutes. Robert stepped forward, shifting Emily to his hip. "My car is right in the front lot. I can drive you. It's the least I can do." His eyes were wet with unshed tears. "That dog saved my granddaughter's life." "Thank you," Jessica said, already fashioning a makeshift muzzle wrap from her light jacket to keep Max's bite wound elevated. "Come on, boy. Stay with me." Max whimpered but followed Jessica's commands, his steps becoming increasingly unsteady. The venom was working quickly through his system, causing visible swelling and pain. As they hurried toward the parking lot, Robert fumbled for his keys with his free hand. "I'm Robert Wilson, by the way. This is Emily." His voice cracked with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. Or him." "Jessica Miller," she replied tersely, her focus primarily on Max, silver Subaru Outback, Robert said as they reached the parking area. Within minutes, they were speeding toward Riverdale Veterinary Hospital, with Robert driving, Emily secured in the back seat with Jessica's belt serving as a makeshift restraint, and Jessica in the back cradling Max's head in her lap. "Stay with me, Max," Jessica murmured, stroking his fur. "You brave, brave boy." Emily watched with wide, solemn eyes. "Is the doggy going to heaven?" she asked in the straightforward way that only children can manage. Jessica looked up, meeting Emily's innocent gaze in the rearview mirror. "Not if I can help it," she answered, her voice firm despite her fear. "Max is very strong, and we're getting him to the doctor very fast." Robert navigated traffic with careful urgency, running a yellow light and taking corners faster than his usual cautious pace. "My daughter's a nurse at County General," he said, needing to fill the tense silence. "She's going to want to thank you properly when she hears about this." Jessica nodded absently, her attention on Max's rapidly deteriorating condition. His breathing had become shallow, and the swelling had spread from his muzzle to his neck. Time was critical now. They screeched into the veterinary hospital parking lot, where Dr. Patel and 2 technicians were already waiting with a gurney. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity as Max was whisked away to the treatment area. "I need to know what kind of rattlesnake it was," Dr. Patel called over his shoulder. "Timber rattler," Jessica replied, her professional knowledge momentarily overriding her emotional distress. About 3 feet long. Adult. He took the bite right on the muzzle while protecting this little girl. Dr. Patel nodded grimly. We'll do everything we can. The antivenom is already being prepared. Jessica stood in the reception area, suddenly still amid the chaos, her hands covered in Max's blood. The adrenaline that had carried her through the crisis began to ebb, leaving her shaking. Robert approached, Emily still in his arms. We'll wait with you, he said simply. For as long as it takes. The waiting room of Riverdale Veterinary Hospital was a sterile space with mint green walls and the lingering scent of antiseptic. Jessica sat rigid in a vinyl chair, her blood-stained hands now cleaned but still trembling slightly. Her eyes remained fixed on the swinging doors that led to the treatment area where Max fought for his life. Robert sat beside her, Emily now dozing against his shoulder after the excitement and trauma of the afternoon. The clock on the wall seemed to move with excruciating slowness, each tick echoing in the quiet room. He's trained as a therapy dog, Jessica said suddenly, breaking the heavy silence. We visit the children's ward at County General every other weekend. A sad smile crossed her face. He's always been good with kids, but this... She shook her head in disbelief. Robert shifted Emily gently to a more comfortable position. How long have you had him? 2 years. He was a rescue. Someone abandoned him as a puppy. Jessica's voice hardened. Can you believe that? Whoever left him never knew what an incredible dog they were throwing away. Robert nodded, his weathered hand patting Jessica's arm awkwardly. Some people don't recognize the value of what they have until it's gone. His eyes drifted to Emily's peaceful sleeping face. I almost learned that lesson today. Jessica's phone buzzed, startling them both. She fumbled to answer it. Hello? Yes, this is Jessica Miller. Her face paled as she listened intently, nodding occasionally. I understand. Yes. Thank you. She hung up and took a deep, shuddering breath. What did they say? Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking Emily. The antivenom is working, but the next few hours are critical. The bite was severe, and facial bites are dangerous because of how quickly they can affect breathing. Jessica's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Dr. Patel says his strong constitution is in his favor. He's a fighter. Robert's free hand closed over Jessica's. So are you, he said with quiet certainty. And you're not alone in this fight. The main entrance doors slid open, and a woman in blue scrubs rushed in, her face etched with worry. She had Emily's chestnut curls and Robert's kind eyes, though now they were wide with concern. Dad, she called, spotting Robert immediately. Is Emily okay? The daycare said you never dropped her off, and then I got your message about a snake. Her words tumbled out in a rush of maternal panic. Sarah, Robert said, rising carefully with Emily still asleep in his arms. Emily's fine. Not a scratch on her. But we've had quite an afternoon. He gestured toward Jessica. This is Jessica Miller. Her dog Max saved Emily from a rattlesnake at the park. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered, looking between her father and Jessica. Understanding dawned on her face as she took in Jessica's bloodied clothing. Your dog? He's being treated now, Jessica explained, her voice strained. He took the bite that was meant for Emily. Sarah crossed the room in 3 quick strides and embraced Jessica, careful not to disturb her sleeping daughter. Thank you, she whispered fiercely. Thank you for what your dog did. Jessica returned the hug awkwardly, her emotional walls beginning to crumble under the weight of Sarah's gratitude and her own fear for Max. He acted on instinct. I didn't do anything. You raised him to be who he is, Sarah countered, pulling back to look Jessica in the eyes. As a mother, I know that counts for everything. She glanced at her father. Dad, what happened exactly? Your message wasn't very clear. Robert shifted Emily, who was beginning to stir. Why don't we sit down? It's quite a story, and Jessica might want to fill in the parts one missed. As they settled into the waiting room chairs, Emily's eyes fluttered open. She looked around in confusion, then smiled as she recognized Jessica. Where's the brave doggy? She asked, her small voice still thick with sleep. Jessica felt tears prick at her eyes. The doctors are making him better, she explained gently. Because he fought the bad snake for me? Emily asked, sliding down from her grandfather's lap to stand in front of Jessica. That's right, Jessica confirmed, surprised by the child's clear understanding of what had happened. Emily nodded solemnly, then reached out to pat Jessica's hand with the innocent compassion that only children can offer. "Don't be sad. Brave doggies always win." The treatment room door swung open, and Dr. Patel emerged, his face etched with the weariness that comes after an intense medical battle. His surgical mask hung loosely around his neck, and he pulled off his latex gloves with practiced precision as he approached the small group in the waiting area. Jessica immediately stood, her heart pounding in her chest. "How is he?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Dr. Patel's expression softened slightly. "Max is stabilized. The anti-venom is counteracting the toxins, but I won't lie to you, Jessica, it was touch and go for a while. The facial bite caused significant swelling that nearly compromised his airway. But he's going to be okay?" Jessica pressed, unconsciously gripping Sarah's hand that had reached out to steady her. "His prognosis is cautiously optimistic," Dr. Patel replied, his Indian accent becoming more pronounced with fatigue. "The next 12 hours will be critical. We've placed him on 4 fluids and pain management. There may be some tissue damage around the bite site, but given his overall health and the quick response time, I believe he has a good chance at a full recovery." Relief washed over Jessica like a physical force, making her knees buckle slightly. Sarah's firm grip kept her upright. "Can I see him?" Jessica asked. Dr. Patel nodded. "Briefly. He's heavily sedated, and we need to monitor him closely." His gaze shifted to include Robert, Sarah, and Emily. "Normally we don't allow non-owners in the treatment area, but given the circumstances." He hesitated, then smiled at Emily, who was watching him with solemn attention. "I understand this brave dog saved your life, young lady?" Emily nodded emphatically. "He fought the bad snake for me." Dr. Patel's professional demeanor softened further. "Then perhaps a short visit would be appropriate, as long as everyone remains quiet and calm." The treatment area was filled with the soft beeping of monitoring equipment and the muted conversations of the veterinary staff. Max lay on a padded table, and 4-line running into his front leg, his swollen muzzle carefully bandaged. Despite the severity of his condition, his chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Jessica approached first, her fingers gently stroking the uninjured side of Max's face. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You really showed that snake who's boss, didn't you?" Max's eyes remained closed, but his tail thumped weakly against the table at the sound of Jessica's voice. Emily tugged at her mother's hand. "Can I say thank you to the brave doggy?" Sarah looked questioningly at Dr. Patel, who nodded his approval. She lifted Emily up so she could see Max properly, but cautioned, "Be very gentle, honey. Max is sleeping to get better." Emily leaned forward in her mother's arms, her small face solemn with purpose. "Thank you for saving me from the snake, Max," she said in a clear, deliberate voice that carried the absolute conviction of a child. "When you get better, you can come to my house for cookies. I'll save the chocolate ones for me, 'cause Mommy says chocolate makes doggies sick, but you can have the other kinds." Robert cleared his throat, fighting back emotion at his granddaughter's innocent gesture. "We owe your dog more than we can ever repay," he said to Jessica, his voice rough with feeling. Jessica smiled through her tears. Just seeing him alive is payment enough. A veterinary technician approached gently. "I'm sorry, but we need to continue monitoring Max closely. You're welcome to wait in the reception area, and we'll update you regularly." As they reluctantly filed out, Dr. Patel pulled Jessica aside. "There's the matter of the treatment costs," he began delicately. "The anti-venom alone is—" "I'll cover whatever Max needs," Sarah interjected firmly, having overheard. "Every penny. My daughter is alive because of that dog." Dr. Patel nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll provide the best care possible. You might want to contact animal control about the snake. If one has ventured that close to the playground, there could be others." "I already notified park security before we left," Jessica said. They were closing the playground area until a proper sweep could be conducted. Back in the waiting room, an uncomfortable realization settled over Jessica. "My car is still at the park," she said, suddenly feeling the weight of practical concerns. "I can drive you back later to get it," Robert offered immediately. "Or Sarah can take you now while I stay with Emily." "Actually," Sarah said, checking her watch, "I need to make a few calls to arrange coverage for my shift tomorrow. I don't think I can leave Emily after what happened today." She looked at Jessica with genuine warmth. "Would you mind if we all stayed a while longer?" I'd like to hear more about Max and you. Darkness had settled over Springfield by the time the veterinary hospital's waiting room emptied of other clients. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting everyone in a pale, clinical glow. Jessica sat with her back against the wall, exhaustion etched into her features, but determination keeping her eyes open. Robert had gone to retrieve coffee from the vending machine in the corner, while Sarah sat beside Jessica, Emily finally asleep again on a makeshift bed of waiting room chairs. She's resilient, Jessica observed, nodding toward the sleeping child. Most kids would be having nightmares after what happened today. Sarah smiled tiredly. She gets that from my mother. Nothing ever seemed to shake Louise. Her expression grew more serious. Have you always worked with animals? Jessica accepted the steaming cup Robert offered as he returned. Thank you, she murmured before addressing Sarah's question. I wanted to be a veterinarian since I was about Emily's age. Couldn't afford veterinary school, but being a vet tech is the next best thing. She sipped the bitter coffee. Max was actually my first foster failure. Foster failure? Robert asked, lowering himself into a chair with a slight wince. Jessica's lips curved into a small smile. That's what we call it when you foster an animal and end up adopting it yourself. I was only supposed to rehabilitate him for a few weeks after he was found abandoned near the highway. He was malnourished, scared of men, and completely untrusting. Her eyes grew distant with the memory. Something just clicked between us. 2 months later, I couldn't imagine letting him go to another home. How did you train him to sense danger like that? Sarah asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Jessica shook her head. I didn't. I trained him for basic obedience and later for therapy work, but what he did today, she paused, emotion catching in her throat. That was pure instinct and heart. German Shepherds have a natural protective drive, especially toward children. The swinging doors opened, and Dr. Patel emerged again, looking slightly less harried than before. Jessica immediately stood, her coffee forgotten. He's holding steady, Dr. Patel announced before she could ask. The swelling has plateaued, which is a good sign. His blood work shows the antivenom is working properly. He offered a tired smile. He's a fighter, that one. When can I take him home? Jessica asked. If he continues to improve, possibly tomorrow afternoon. He'll need careful monitoring and follow-up treatment, but dogs generally recover better in familiar environments. Dr. Patel hesitated. Jessica, you should go home and get some rest. We have your number, and we'll call immediately if there's any change. Robert stood up. He's right. Let me drive you home, and then I can take you to pick up your car in the morning. Jessica looked torn, glancing back toward the treatment area. I don't want to leave him alone. He's not alone, Dr. Patel assured her. Marissa is on night shift, and you know how she dotes on the critical patients. Sarah reached out and squeezed Jessica's hand. You need to rest to be strong for Max tomorrow. Dad can drop you home, and I can pick you up in the morning on my way to work. The hospital is only a few blocks from here. Finally, Jessica nodded, the exhaustion of the day catching up with her. Okay, but please, call me for anything, even if it seems minor. The ride to Jessica's small bungalow on Maple Street was quiet, with Emily transferred to the back seat of Robert's car, still sleeping soundly. When they pulled into her driveway, Jessica stared at her darkened house, suddenly aware of how empty it would feel without Max's greeting at the door. Would you like us to come in with you? Robert asked gently, recognizing the look of dread on her face. Jessica shook her head. No, but thank you. You've done more than enough. She turned to face him fully. Mr. Wilson, Robert, please. Robert, she amended. I think Max and I were meant to be at that park today. I don't usually take that route on Wednesdays, but something made me change our routine. Robert's eyes grew misty. I believe that too. Some things in this world can't be explained by coincidence. He reached across and patted her hand. Get some sleep, Jessica. Tomorrow will be brighter. As she watched Robert's taillights disappear down her quiet street, Jessica felt a strange mixture of emptiness and fullness, grief for Max's suffering and gratitude for the unexpected connections formed in crisis. Inside her home, Max's empty bed by the fireplace nearly broke her composure, but she forced herself to take a shower and change into clean clothes. Just as exhaustion pulled her toward sleep, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emily wanted me to send you this before she fell asleep again. Sarah, attached was a crayon drawing of what was unmistakably a German shepherd with a cape, standing protectively beside a small girl with brown curls. Morning light filtered through Jessica's bedroom blinds, rousing her from a fitful sleep filled with dreams of snakes and hospital corridors. For a disorienting moment, she reached across her bed, expecting to feel Max's warm body where he often migrated during the night despite her half-hearted attempts to keep him on his own bed. The empty space brought yesterday's events crashing back. Jessica grabbed her phone. No missed calls from the veterinary hospital, which she chose to interpret as good news. A text from Sarah confirmed she would pick her up at 7:30 a.m., just 30 minutes from now. Moving with purpose, Jessica showered quickly and dressed in fresh clothes, pausing only to make a strong cup of coffee and force down a piece of toast she didn't want but knew she needed. At precisely 7:30, a gray Honda Civic pulled into her driveway. Sarah emerged, dressed in hospital scrubs with her hair pulled back in a practical bun. Unlike yesterday, her face was composed, though the dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much better than Jessica. "Good morning," Sarah greeted her. Emily wanted to come, but Robert took her to preschool. She made this for Max, though. She handed Jessica a small package wrapped in construction paper decorated with enthusiastic crayon scribbles. "That's incredibly sweet," Jessica said, carefully placing the package in her bag. "Have you heard anything?" "I called about 10 minutes ago," Sarah replied as they both got into the car. "Dr. Patel says Max had a good night. The swelling is starting to go down." Relief washed over Jessica, and she leaned back against the headrest. "Thank you for the ride. And for everything yesterday." Sarah pulled out of the driveway, navigating the quiet residential streets with practiced ease. "It's nothing compared to what Max did for Emily." She glanced sideways at Jessica. "Dad told me you do therapy work with Max at County General?" "Every other Saturday in the pediatric ward," Jessica confirmed. "It actually started as part of his rehabilitation. He was so fearful when I got him, especially around men and children. Exposure therapy evolved into actual therapy work." "That explains it, then," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Explains what?" "Why he reacted so instinctively to protect Emily. He's been trained to see children as something precious." Jessica considered this. "Maybe, though I think it's just who he is at his core." The training enhanced what was already there. They pulled into the veterinary hospital parking lot, and Jessica was out of the car almost before Sarah had fully stopped. Inside, the morning shift receptionist recognized her immediately. "He's awake and his vitals are stable," she said before Jessica could even ask. "Dr. Patel is doing rounds, but Marissa said you can go back." Jessica hurried through the swinging doors, Sarah following more sedately. In the treatment area, Max was no longer on the examination table, but in a large kennel with the door open. A young veterinary technician with a colorful bandana holding back her dark hair was sitting cross-legged on the floor beside him, gently coaxing him to drink from a water bowl. "Jessica," Marissa exclaimed. "Look who decided to rejoin the land of the living around 5 a.m. Max's ears perked up at Jessica's voice, and he attempted to rise, though his movements were still unsteady. The bandage around his muzzle had been changed, and while the swelling was still obvious, it had noticeably decreased. "Easy, buddy," Jessica said, dropping to her knees beside the kennel. "Don't push yourself." Max ignored her caution, struggling to his feet and pushing his body against hers, his tail wagging weakly but determinedly. Jessica wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his neck fur, inhaling the antiseptic hospital smell mixed with his familiar scent. "He's doing remarkably well," Dr. Patel said, entering the treatment area with a clipboard. "His labs this morning show significant improvement. The tissue damage is less extensive than I initially feared." "When can I take him home?" Jessica asked, not moving from her position beside Max. "This afternoon, if he continues to improve. He'll need antibiotics and pain management for a while, and we'll need to monitor the bite site for necrosis, but I'm optimistic." Dr. Patel glanced at Sarah, recognizing her from the previous night. "Your daughter's drawing is actually on our bulletin board already. The staff has been quite moved by this story." Sarah smiled. "It's the least we could do. I was just telling Jessica that I'd like to help with Max's medical expenses." Jessica started to protest, but Sarah held up a hand. "Please, let me do this. My daughter's life is worth far more than any vet bill." Dr. Patel tactfully excused himself to give them privacy, saying he would return with discharge instructions later. Jessica remained on the floor beside Max, who had settled with his head in her lap, his amber eyes watching her face as if afraid she might disappear again. She stroked his ears gently, avoiding the swollen side of his face. "You know," Sarah said, crouching down to their level. "Emily hasn't stopped talking about the brave doggy since she woke up this morning. She told her entire preschool class about how Max saved her from a bad snake with angry shaking." Despite everything, Jessica laughed. "I can just imagine that show-and-tell session." 3 days later, Max was recovering at home. His swelling significantly reduced, though a noticeable scar was forming where the snake's fangs had punctured his muzzle. He lay on his bed by the fireplace, his favorite plush duck toy between his paws, watching Jessica's every move with devoted eyes. The forced inactivity was clearly frustrating for the energetic shepherd, but the pain medication kept him subdued. Jessica had taken a week off work to monitor his recovery, sleeping on the couch rather than in her bedroom, so she could be near him during the night. The coffee table was cluttered with antibiotic bottles, gauze, and the special ointment Dr. Patel had prescribed for the wound. A knock at the door made Max's ears perk up, though he didn't attempt to rise as he would have normally done. Jessica opened the door to find Robert, Sarah, and Emily standing on her porch, Emily clutching a gift bag decorated with paw prints and a large, slightly lopsided homemade card. "We hope we're not intruding," Sarah said with a tentative smile. "Emily has been asking to see Max every hour on the hour since the incident." "You're not intruding at all," Jessica replied, genuinely pleased to see them. "Come in. Max is resting by the fireplace, but I know he'd love some gentle company." Emily approached Max with surprising restraint for a 3-year-old, her movements slow and careful as she knelt beside his bed. "Hello, brave doggy," she whispered. "Are you feeling better?" Max's tail thumped against his bed, and he lifted his head slightly to sniff at Emily's outstretched hand. "He remembers me," Emily exclaimed delightedly, looking back at her mother and grandfather. "Of course he does," Robert said, lowering himself carefully into an armchair nearby. "You don't forget someone you've protected." Jessica brought coffee for the adults and apple juice for Emily, along with some oatmeal cookies she'd baked during her unexpected time off. "The doctor says he's healing remarkably well," she told them. "No signs of necrosis, and his energy is starting to come back. Too much so, actually, it's hard keeping him from being too active." Sarah smiled sympathetically. "Sounds like Emily after her tonsillectomy last year. She was trying to do cartwheels 2 days post-op." Emily, now sitting cross-legged beside Max's bed, carefully presented her homemade card. Jessica opened it to find a crayon masterpiece of Max with a superhero cape, standing protectively beside Emily, with a defeated snake in the background. "My hero" was written across the top in wobbly capital letters. "This is beautiful, Emily," Jessica said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to hang it right here on the refrigerator so Max and I can see it every day." "And we brought presents," Emily announced, pushing the gift bag toward Jessica. "For both of you." Inside, Jessica found a plush toy shaped like a firefighter for Max, a gift card to a local bakery for herself, and a framed photograph that made her breath catch. Somehow, Sarah had managed to capture the moment in the treatment room when Emily had first thanked Max, the small girl leaning carefully toward the injured dog, her face solemn with gratitude. "This is..." Jessica struggled to find words. "Thank you. This means so much." Robert cleared his throat. "We also wanted to talk to you about something else." He exchanged glances with Sarah. The local newspaper caught wind of what happened at the park. Animal Control made an official report, and apparently, one of the park staff spoke to a reporter. Jessica frowned slightly. "I'm not sure how I feel about publicity." "That's exactly why we wanted to warn you," Sarah explained. "A reporter named James Keller called the hospital asking for my contact information. When I spoke with him, he seemed very interested in doing a human interest story about Max's heroism. We wanted to make sure you were comfortable with that before we said anything more," Robert added. "It's your dog, your privacy." Jessica looked down at Max, who had dozed off with Emily gently stroking his uninjured ear. "What do you think would happen if we did the story?" Sarah shrugged. "It would probably run in the Sunday edition, maybe get picked up by some local TV stations if it's a slow news week." Keller mentioned something about nominations for the ASPCA's Heroic Dog Award. Jessica considered this. On one hand, she valued her privacy and wasn't comfortable with attention. On the other hand, Max's story might inspire others to see sheltered dogs differently, to understand the depth of their capacity for loyalty and love. You know, Robert said thoughtfully, breaking the silence. When I was a boy, my father told me something I've never forgotten. He said that sometimes the universe puts us in exactly the right place at the right time, not by accident, but because that's where we're meant to be. His weathered face creased in a smile. I think Max was meant to be in that park, meant to find Emily. And maybe sharing that story is part of the purpose too. Emily looked up from her gentle petting. Max is a superhero, and everybody should know about superheroes. Jessica felt something shift inside her, a recognition that Max's act of bravery wasn't just about saving one child, but perhaps about something larger. Okay, she said finally. Let's talk to the reporter. But only if we can all be there together. The whole story deserves to be told. Sarah reached across and squeezed Jessica's hand. Like a family, she said softly. 6 months after the incident at Oakwood Park, the Springfield Community Center hummed with activity. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling, and rows of chairs faced a small stage adorned with flowers and a podium. A large poster featuring Max's now familiar face stood on an easel by the entrance, announcing the first annual Springfield Heroes Among Us charity event. Jessica adjusted Max's special therapy dog vest, which now bore a custom patch reading Hero of Oakwood Park. The scar on his muzzle had healed into a distinctive crescent shape that, if anything, made him look more dignified. At her side, Emily bounced excitedly in a new dress picked specifically for the occasion, her chestnut curls tamed into neat ribbons. Is Max nervous? Emily asked, reaching up to pat his side gently. In the months since the snake incident, Emily had appointed herself Max's unofficial assistant during his therapy visits, which now included regular stops at her preschool for a reading program Jessica had helped establish. I don't think so, Jessica replied, smiling down at the child who had become such an unexpected fixture in her life. He's been to bigger events than this. Sarah approached, clipboard in hand, looking harried but happy. After the newspaper article about Max had gone viral, she had spearheaded efforts to create a foundation promoting both responsible dog ownership and snake safety awareness in public parks. Today's fundraiser was the culmination of months of planning. We're almost ready to start, Sarah announced. Dad's showing the mayor to his seat now. How's our guest of honor holding up? Max wagged his tail at the sound of Sarah's voice, his posture relaxed despite the growing crowd. The bond that had formed between the Wilson family and Jessica had deepened over the months, evolving from gratitude into genuine friendship. Sunday dinners at Robert's house had become a tradition, with Max always given the place of honor by Emily's chair. He's a pro, Jessica said proudly. Unlike me, I still hate public speaking. Sarah squeezed her arm reassuringly. Just speak from the heart. That's what connects with people anyway. The community center continued to fill with Springfield residents. The story of Max's heroism had struck a chord locally, then regionally, and finally nationally when a major morning show had featured a segment on the superhero shepherd. The resulting attention had brought an unexpected flood of donations to both the local animal shelter where Max had once been housed and to Sarah's new foundation. Robert made his way through the crowd, looking distinguished in a suit Jessica had never seen him wear before. They're ready for us, he said, offering his arm to Jessica. Shall we? As they took their places on stage, Jessica, Max, and Emily in the center with Sarah and Robert flanking them, Jessica marveled at the unlikely chain of events that had brought them all together. One ordinary Wednesday afternoon had forever altered the trajectory of multiple lives. Mayor Jenkins approached the podium, his voice booming through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today to celebrate not just one heroic act, but the remarkable community spirit that has grown from it. He gestured toward the stage. 6 months ago, a dog named Max sensed danger and acted instinctively to save young Emily Wilson from a venomous snake. Today, that single act of bravery has blossomed into a movement that has raised over $50,000 for animal welfare and park safety initiatives. Applause thundered through the room, causing Max to stand at attention, though he remained calmly at Jessica's side. I'd like to invite Jessica Miller, Max's owner, to say a few words, the mayor continued, stepping aside from the podium. Jessica approached slowly, Max padding beside her. She surveyed the room filled with friends, neighbors, colleagues, and strangers, all united by a shared appreciation for the bond between humans and animals. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "When I adopted Max 2 years ago, he was scared, untrusting, and had been abandoned by those who should have protected him." She reached down to stroke Max's head. "I thought I was saving him, but as it turned out, he was the one with the bigger rescue plan." Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. "People often ask if I trained Max to detect danger or to protect children. The truth is, I didn't. What happened that day in Oakwood Park came from something inside Max that no human could instill, an innate goodness and protective instinct that many animals possess if given the chance to show it." Jessica looked down at Emily, who beamed up at her with unconditional adoration. Max's act of bravery saved one precious life that day, but the ripple effects have gone so much further. The new snake barriers and warning systems in our parks, the educational programs in our schools, the increased adoptions at our local shelters. All of these things mean that Max didn't just save Emily. He potentially saved many others too. Her voice caught slightly, and she felt Robert's steadying hand on her shoulder. The real hero in this story isn't just Max, though. It's all of you who saw something special in what he did and decided to take action. It's Sarah Wilson, who transformed gratitude into purpose with the foundation. It's Robert Wilson, who shares his wisdom and home with us every Sunday. And it's Emily, who reminds all of us daily that heroes come in many forms, sometimes on 4 legs with wet noses and wagging tails. As the audience rose in a standing ovation, Jessica knelt beside Max, wrapping her arms around his neck as she had done in the veterinary hospital 6 months before. He turned his head to lick her cheek once, his amber eyes filled with the same steadfast loyalty they had always held. "Good boy," she whispered in his ear. "The very best boy." Later, as the event wound down and volunteers began stacking chairs, Emily sat on the edge of the stage, her legs dangling as she shared a paper plate of dog-safe treats with Max. Robert and Sarah stood with Jessica, watching the unlikely pair. "You know," Robert said thoughtfully, "when Louise, Sarah's mother, passed away, I thought my family had stopped growing. That at my age, it was just about holding on to what I had left." His eyes twinkled as he looked at Jessica. "I never expected a snake and a German shepherd to prove me wrong." Sarah nodded in agreement. Life has a way of bringing the right people together, even through unlikely circumstances. "And the right dogs," Jessica added, watching as Emily gently fed Max another treat, whispering secrets in his ear that made his tail thump against the stage floor. In that moment, surrounded by her newfound family, Jessica understood with perfect clarity what Robert had meant about being in the right place at the right time. The universe had indeed conspired to put Max in Oakwood Park that fateful Wednesday, not just to save a child from a snake, but to weave together lives that might otherwise never have intersected. As the last of the sunlight streamed through the community center windows, casting long shadows across the floor, Emily's laughter rang out, bright and clear. Max stood at attention, his scarred muzzle lifted proudly, as if he somehow understood that he had not merely fought a snake that day in the park. He had helped create a family. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications bell, and if you watched all the way through, comment, "I watched all the way through," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very exciting.